Welcome to E-commerce World Virtual Summit 2020. Thank you for joining us. And hello, Yuri. How are you?
Very good, Joseph. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Let me introduce Mr. Jorij Abraham. He is here in Netherlands, in Europe, and he's joining all the way to the event this year and to share with us the impact and e-commerce development in Europe. So Yuri, can you share with us, is the coronavirus impacting the business a lot over in Europe?
Yes, the impact is incredible. I think the way the coronavirus is handled in Asia has proven much more effective than what we are doing in Europe. The impact is really hard, and we don't see the light at the end of the tunnel yet. So it's going to really impact the way we do trade for long term.
Right. So I'm sure as I have spoken to several other speakers, the other side of it is that it's generating more online sales. That some people before they may not familiar with buying online, and now they have no choice. Right. So what do you see? What kind of product categories do you see that is increasing demand from people buying online?
I will go into that deeper in my presentation.
Right.
But I think it's across the world. We see a sharp rise, or we have seen a sharp rise in do-it-yourself, in food ordering. And I think I also have an idea of where we're going next, but I will do that in my presentation if you don't mind.
Well, yeah, that's great. So why don't we pass it along to you and share with us your presentation, and we'll come back to chat a little bit later after that.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Joseph already gave a brief introduction. My name is Jorij Abraham, or easier Jorij Abraham. I run the Ecommerce Foundation. Our mission is to foster global digital trade, and the idea behind that is that the more we trade, hopefully, we will more get into a better world, and the foundation likes to contribute to that in its own small way. We offer several services. We started off with publishing reports on how to sell online. In the USA, in Brazil, in China, in Germany. Please feel free to check our websites for free versions. And the reports are downloaded about 50,000 times a year. We also have an online community called ecommercewiki.org, where now more than 40,000 e-commerce professionals share their knowledge and insights. We offer a trust seal called safe.shop, allowing web shops across the world to sell easier to consumers abroad. And finally, we own a website called Scam Advisor, which helps consumers to check if a website is legit or a scam. And we have about 2.5 million consumers checking our database every month. But that's enough about the foundation. Joseph asked me to present a little bit on what the coronavirus is doing in Europe in the e-commerce industry. And it started off mild, but things changed very quickly. And I think we all went through the same process. Maybe the timing was a little bit different, but now, we're all deep into the corona crisis. What we've seen in Europe is things started earlier in Asia, but in April and May, e-commerce really grew phenomenal. Many of the countries in Europe were in lockdown, and getting products, the only way often was to actually order online. So it really grew e-commerce phenomenally. It differed very much per product category. Many people in Europe started ordering hardware, do-it-yourself articles, and started renovating their homes and their gardens. But we've seen, of course, also with services like Disney Disney Plus was launched in Europe, and it really grew like mad. Disney Plus has gained 50 million subscribers in less than a half year. It was an incredible growth. What we see across the world is that actually the impact on the corona crisis differs very much per country, but because every country deals with the coronavirus in its own way. So in most of Western Europe, we saw a strong growth in e-commerce, up to 100%. But in certain countries, actually like Greece and Eastern Europe, but also Brazil, e-commerce shrank for the first few months because the governments decided to also not allow online delivery, meaning that you could also not sell online. And that behavior also changed during time. I mean, in Spain, first stores were closed and also online delivery was limited. It grew quickly and then it shrank again. So depending on how the coronavirus is behaving and the amount of people who gets infected, the influence on e-commerce is very rapidly changing. But overall, we see a growth of more than 50%. So what are the short-term impacts on the coronavirus? I mean, one thing is clear, the impact is going to be very strong, or is already very strong, and is forcing companies really to transform much more quickly to a digital company than they thought possibly maybe a half a year ago. On the short term, we see three different kinds of impact. We see higher costs for e-commerce companies. We see a lot of logistic challenges. And I would not be surprised that certain markets actually will decline, also for e-commerce. Maybe briefly zoom in to that. I mean, you all have had to face additional costs to guarantee hygiene, but also sick leave increased dramatically. I don't know what the figures are in Asia, but in the Netherlands, sick leave increased from 1 or 2% to more than 8% due to the coronavirus, because people have to stay at home, even if they have a mild flu or they feel a little bit ill, you have to stay at home. But Amazon, for example, is testing now more than 50,000 distribution center workers a day. They have their own test centers, and they estimate they're spending about $800 million on fighting the corona disease and trying to keep the impact as limited as possible. We see the same in logistical costs. The cost of air freight has increased phenomenally. Also here, it depends very strongly per country, but we've seen growth prices being raised up to 400%. And my expectation with air freight is that that will remain so. We expect for 2021 a growth of about 40% in demand for air freight, but the costs will increase because the passenger travel, and usually in the same flight where you have a lot of passengers, there was also a lot of air freight. The passenger transports are down a lot, so the cost of air freight will keep on increasing for the next few months. We see the same with distribution centers. We are now already at the same cost level where we are usually in peak season. Of course, this differs again per country, but we also see delivery companies like the Belgian Post, the German Post, increase their delivery costs towards e-commerce shops because of the increased demand, but also they have to make more costs to keep everything hygienic. And finally, there's a big debate going around about work productivity. At the moment, it seems that people working from home are about 13% more productive. 9% simply because they work longer, they make more hours, they have to travel less. 4% due to less distraction, less meetings. But I would not be surprised that in a year time, we will learn that working from home is not only more productive. We are social animals. We like to be in touch. And my fear is that only conferencing via video and home working will lead to a more social isolation and in the end less collaboration. So I'm very curious to see what will happen with work productivity in the midterm. Apart from the cost structure, we will see a logistical nightmare probably in November, December. I mean, these are pictures from last year with the peak season. Imagine that the same infrastructure now has to handle 50% or maybe even 100% more. It looks like, especially in Europe, we are having a massive second wave. More and more countries are expected to go in lockdown. Very concretely, the expectation is that Belgium, France, Germany, the Netherlands might be going in full lockdown in 2 or 3 weeks if the number of infected people continues like this. So there will be an increased demand for online delivery again, and that in combination with 11/11, Cyber Monday, Christmas, we will live in very interesting times logistical wise in the next few months. And finally, my last short-term impact is the economy. Overall, we see that Europe has been hit very hard with figures ranging from a few percent until 8 or 10% reduction in GDP. Many expect that in 2021 that we will nearly fully recover. And very honestly, I have my doubts there because what makes this economic recession different from other recessions we had before is that it is impacting nearly all the countries. And in previous recessions, we had always a part of the world which was not in an economic recession and was able to pull the other parts of the world out of that recession. Now we're all in it. Excuse me. So I'm very curious what will happen. I do believe we will recover, but I do think it will take longer than 2021, and that will have an impact on you. I mean, once consumers can buy less, are unemployed, it will also start to influence e-commerce. And I do expect that in certain product categories like fashion, like consumer electronics, there will be less demand, maybe even resulting in less online demand. So what about the long-term impact? How will that influence the e-commerce industry? Here again, I see 3 big changes. One is I do believe e-commerce will continue to grow, but the consumer is changing very rapidly in its behavior, and it's something we have to pay attention to. And finally, I see a trend called regional platformization, and I will go into that later. First, regarding growth, the expectations in Europe are that up to 20 to 30% of all physical stores will shutter. We already see this happening in the USA, where many very well-known retailers are closing down. Some are even, like Microsoft, are really deciding to stop with their physical retail. And my fear is that this will be a self-reinforcing effect, because once you see a few stores closing down in a shopping street, the entire shopping street becomes much less interesting for consumers. And Corona will not go away for quite a while. So one of the big added values of shops is that they are fun. They should be an experience. But at the moment, we're stopping consumers to enter a shop. We want them to leave the store as fast as possible. We cannot afford to give them an experience. And my fear is that once the coronavirus is solved, we will have so many empty stores that entire shopping streets and malls will have to close down. We already see this happening, especially in less urban districts, that the shopping streets are closing down because they have enough not sufficient consumers anymore to shop. It will, of course, it will be terrible for physical retail, but it will drive more consumers towards e-commerce on the long term. What we also see is a change in behavior. I mean, in Europe, we believe that working at home will be something which we will keep. It will not go away anymore. Workers like it. it seems to be more productive, although I have doubts on the long term. And this is leading to a change in behavior. We've seen it with streaming media, with Disney being much more popular, but also there's an increased demand in online training, in online therapy, services which did not exist, like quarantine dating, are popping up. So it gives us also a lot of new opportunities. Of course, food delivery will increase more and more, but we already see a trend in Europe where people are starting to buy cars online. So they no longer go to a car dealer at all. They really order the car online, and Volvo has started to sell directly, which was unthinkable a few years ago. And we see the same trend with houses. People, actually the number of houses being sold in the Netherlands has remained stable, even a small increase. But people are no longer visiting the house. They do that entirely via video and virtual reality walkthrough, and they nearly buy the house online. Same with digital services. We see an increased need in online health, in virtual travel, and I believe the gaming industry, and especially virtual gaming, will increase dramatically in the next few years. The final trend I see is a regionalization, and we already had a lot of political tensions between the East and especially the United States, which has caused a decline in global trade. And my fear is that it will continue, because one of the things which has become very visible, at least in Europe, is our dependency on China, but also on the US for certain product categories. For example, at the moment, 80% of all the medicine we use in Europe are produced in China and India, and that has, the politicians have believed that has made us very vulnerable. So I'm personally a very strong believer in global trade, but I'm afraid that for the next few years we will see a decline in global trade and a more regionalization of trade. The same with platforms. I mean, we've seen what is happening with TikTok, and I fear that the platforms will become more based on continents. I also think that Facebook, Amazon, Google will be having serious troubles keeping operational in Europe. I mean, they will, of course, stay there, but they will have more and more legislation to keep on. One of the big discussions we have at the moment with Facebook is that Europe no longer wants to have the data of European citizens stored in the USA. And Facebook at the moment says, yeah, then it's impossible to offer Facebook in Europe. I'm very curious what will happen there. So I don't like to be the bearer of bad news, but Corona, especially in Europe, we expect that it will stay here for quite a while longer. How to survive Corona as a company, and one of the exercises I'm doing a lot with retailers is creating a scenario planning. It allows you to look at the future and develop different visions on what the future might look like. So we might have open borders in the future, we might have closed borders, we might be able to manage the pandemic, or we might not be able to manage the pandemic, and that creates different future scenarios, and it helps you to think about what should we do now if we have a World War Z scenario, or if we start to fight Corona more together. And it allows you to create flexibility in your business and make strategic decisions. And I really recommend you really try to develop these kind of scenarios to prepare your organization for it. In that, and I'm sorry to bring the bearer of bad news, the next crisis is already being developed. We are having a climate change. It will impact business, and also there you have to think ahead of time and see how can you make your company more resistant to these kind of crises. To end on a positive note, the coronavirus is not all bad. It has led to an economic disruption and creative destruction. And what we've seen in the past is with the SARS epidemic in 2002, it really gave a boost to internet penetration in Asia, in China, and helped Alibaba and JD to grow. And I do believe that we can create business opportunities, survive the corona epidemic, and create a new economy for the future. And with that, I wish you very much success. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present, Joseph.
Thank you very much, Yuri, for sharing us so impressive piece of information. And the information is very valuable for us who is outside Europe. And I really get the advantage of hearing story firsthand from you and from our friends in China, Alibaba. We also been hearing our friends from Southeast Asia as well as in Japan. And so for those of you now watching this video, please do also watch our other videos because they are also as good as this one. Now, Yuri, I'm sure there's a line of people want to ask the question, but given time, I've picked some questions that a lot of people may want to understand more about the situation in Europe. First question is, during this pandemic, yes, as you have mentioned in your PowerPoint, this coronavirus may last a little longer or it may not go away. So, yes. And we already see a lot of changes during this pandemic, like people are finding new ways to get their Zoom class. New people are finding ways to purchase online. They're finding ways to order food online. So what are the things? What are the changes during this pandemic in the new normal that you think it will stay? It will not go away.
I do think that, as I said in the presentation, it's very clear already that people will work a lot more from home, and people will order a lot more online. That's very clear. At the moment, e-commerce is about 50% bigger than last year, and that's of course very dependent per country. But the expectations is that 20 to 30% of that growth will remain, and I think very honestly that that's probably on the low side. So we will continue to shop much more online, and will have a need for more digital services, especially in entertainment, and how to make sure we don't get bored.
Right, correct. I would like to add to it is that during the pandemic, I think it's not just that we cannot visit the physical store or go to the physical restaurant and we have no choice to get it online, but I think it's the opportunities for creating new user experience, and people start realizing, hey, I didn't go to physical store because I couldn't go, but now when they start try the new online experience, they probably find something that they could never get it in a physical store, and they will love it. So I hope that that also create opportunities. The second question that a lot of people asking me was, Europe has always been, from us doing internet business, digital business, or e-commerce, has been the region that is concerning the most on data privacy. Like you have GDPR, you have many ways of protecting people's data. Whereas in other part of the region, like in China, for example, or in some Asian countries, they may not be so concerning so much. Now, with the pandemic, one of the debate that people are saying that people are giving up a lot for data privacy, because for social securities. Because you have to release your relatives, your friends' information, your addresses, because we got to know that are you having people are surrounding you is infected. Now, do you see that with the two contradiction? Is Europe now releasing or relaxing in terms of the people protecting their data privacy?
The simple answer is, in general, no. What we've seen is that each country has developed its own mobile app, but the Netherlands is a nice example. The app has already been on the market now for 3 months. But it's not in use because the parliament has only, I think, yesterday approved the usage. And after an incredible long debate on privacy, and most European countries are very, very careful in forcing people to make the choice of privacy versus protection.
Yeah.
The coronavirus, they choose privacy, or they are very careful of that. Personally, in my heart, I'm more Asian because I do think that protection is very important, and there's always a balance. But in Europe, the balance remains towards privacy.
Right. Yeah. I could have shared you some countries in Asia. Government announced that, you know, if you have people surrounding you that is infected, without asking you, your information will publicly posted in a website that, you know, who are the people that are surrounding you, where did they go, they use GPS to track you, and then you know, 3 p.m. which 7-Eleven did you go, you know, evening which bar did you go, because they got to make sure that where did you go, and then to tell people that don't go to that places, and they did not even ask you whether you agree or not, and all this information, the name, addresses, will post publicly, and for the reason they said this is protecting everybody.
The choices every country has to make for itself, but in Europe that would not be possible.
All right. So I think that's something that for people in Asia or for other region, that we probably take that as an example, that we really need to, as a citizen or as a business owner or even as government, really have to rethink about the importance of data privacy versus you know, general securities. Well, thank you very much, Jorij, for joining us today, and you know, we wish you good health, and we hope everything will back to normal soon, and all the best, Jorij.
Thank you very much. I wish everybody good health, and I hope to meet you again physically in 1 year.
Thank you. Yeah, looking forward to see you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.